Biblical scholars have argued for years about the location of these holy sites. Now, one man says he might have found them.
Mount Sinai has been the most disputed mountain in human history for thousands of years.
This is the Holy Lands. Beneath my feet, just rocky desert. This is incredible.
The actual location of the spot where Moses is claimed to have received the 10 Commandments has never been established.
We're in Saudi Arabia, climbing the real Mount Sinai.
This year, archaeologists scanned one of the top potential mountains using a drone fitted with ground-penetrating radar that is 100 times more powerful than any prior device.
Saudis do block off these archaeological sites that we believe are linked to Moses and the Exodus, which prevented really high-quality video and photos from coming out to the outside.
They were stunned by what it discovered. There were geometric patterns, hidden chambers, and straight lines beneath the rock that could not have been created by natural processes. If verified, these scans might completely alter the narrative of Exodus, the mountain that is forbidden. What it found may ultimately validate theories that have generated controversy for decades. The drone did more than just take pictures as it flew over the mountain. It exposed geometric patterns that were not found in nature, straight lines, buried structures, and shapes beneath the rock. For the first time, there was concrete evidence solid enough to refute centuries of debate among academics, explorers, and religious groups. According to the scans, Mount Sinai may actually be in Saudi Arabia's extreme northwest, close to Jabal Maqla and Jabal Alas. This discovery revived a discussion that had been stalled for a long time due to scholarly conflict, governmental limitations, and the region's inaccessibility. We must look at both the reasons for and against the Arabian location in order to see why this revelation is so disruptive. The Jebel al-Lawz theory's proponents start with the text of the Bible. The Apostle Paul stated that Mount Sinai is located in Arabia in the book of Galatians. They contend that this was a clear geographical declaration that placed Sinai outside Egyptian boundaries and over the Mediterranean in what was once known as Arabia, rather than symbolic language. They also refer to Moses' escape from Egypt. He came across the flaming bush while residing in Midian, east of the Gulf of Aqaba. It would make sense for the Israelites to travel in that direction after leaving Egypt and crossing the sea if Moses was already aware of the location of the mountain of God. The physical evidence, according to supporters, supports this viewpoint. The neighboring mountains are granite, but the boulders at the top of Jebel Lawz are particularly dark, as though they have been burned. They relate this to Exodus 19, where God descends onto the mountain, causing it to shake, smoke, and burn. There's a huge boulder near the base of the mountain that has been neatly divided in half, with a perfect groove separating the two pieces. Even though the area is currently among the driest, there are indications of strong water flow in the surrounding environment. This is connected by believers to the rock that Moses smote in Exodus 17. In front of the mountain is a sizable open area that could accommodate a sizable camp, and continuous lines of stones seem to indicate borders. Supporters claim that these are consistent with the prophecies found in Exodus, where the Israelites were warned not to touch the mountain or perish. There's a big, seemingly man-made stone platform nearby. It is recognized by some as the altar that Moses constructed during the covenant ritual. Surrounding, there is another straightforward building that some people identify with the golden calf, and surrounding rocks have old representations of cows and bulls etched into them. Near the location, a tall stone pillar stands by itself. Some people believe it to be one of the 12 pillars Moses built to symbolize the tribes of Israel. These characteristics come together to create an image that many people think is too similar to the biblical story to be accidental. However, there are technical differences between professional archaeologists and historians. They point out that the Sinai Peninsula was part of the Roman Empire's Arabia, Petria province during Paul's lifetime. Paul was therefore referring to the political geography of his day rather than the Arabian Peninsula when he stated that Sinai was in Arabia. Additionally, they note that Egyptian record from as early as 2000 BCE reference an area in the southern Sinai Peninsula known as Thihat or Safed, which linguists regard as an early form of the term Sinai. This connects the word to the Egyptian peninsula that existed millennia before Moses. The lack of late Bronze Age artifacts is another significant point of contention. There are no remnants of an Exodus encampment, tools, ceramics, or inscriptions. Supporters emphasize characteristics can come from unrelated cultures from later times. The Black Summit rock is naturally occurring. Broken boulders form on their own in deserts. Stone lines may be animal pins or territory markers, and there are no indications of ancient ritual activity at the purported altars, according to scientists. Before technology changed the situation, the debate was in balance for many years. Archaeologists were astounded in 2012 when LAR scans in Angkor, Cambodia, showed an entire secret city grid beneath thick jungle. Imagine a drone carrying a radar that was 100 times more powerful than earlier models and sent over isolated Arabian mountains that were seldom reachable. The quest for Mount Sinai has entered a new phase as a result of what transpired in 2025. At last, the drone has produced information that points to a particular peak, one whose patterns correspond with the scans. However, that finding raises a fresh query. What is the purpose of that mountain? And long before anyone saw the evidence, who discovered this secret location? The sacred grounds layers. The site at the burning bush was already sacred when Moses came, according to archaeologists and textual experts. In the book of Exodus, an important detail is frequently missed. The voice Moses heard as he approached the unusual flame did not declare that the land would become holy. Instead of saying, "Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy ground." This suggests that the mountain of God, Horeb, was hallowed long before Moses saw it. As a result, many academics think Moses did not find an uncharted mountain. He went into a place that was already hallowed. He fled Egypt, moved in Midian, married into the priestly household of Jethro, also known as Reuel, and lived among people who had a profound spiritual awareness of their surroundings. Moses was not aimlessly traveling as a shepherd under Jethro. He was traveling in a region molded by Midianite beliefs, where sacred sites were acknowledged and revered. When he arrived in Horeb, he entered a hallowed area revered for many generations. The later Christian history of the area is strengthened by the notion that Moses came upon a mountain that was already considered divine, particularly with the establishment of St. Catherine's Monastery in the 4th and 6th centuries. The monastery's beginnings show how subsequent generations influenced the memory of that mountain, even if it is currently one of the most potent symbols associated with the Moses story. Christian perceptions of sacred sites underwent a significant change during the reign of Emperor Constantine the Great. Christians did not visit hallowed places as they do now prior to his reign. Their faith was based on spiritual truths, stressing that the actual Jerusalem was celestial rather than earthly, and that God was present everywhere. This was completely altered by Constantine's conversion. All of a sudden, the Roman Empire started locating and safeguarding actual locations associated with biblical events. Empress Helena, his mother, was a key figure in this new movement. She journeyed throughout Palestine and the surrounding areas in 326 CE in search of locations connected to Jesus' life and other significant biblical events. Monks started congregating in the isolated desert beneath Jabal Musa, the Egyptian peak traditionally connected to the biblical Mount Sinai, at the same period of expanding pilgrimage culture. These early monks were drawn by a straightforward belief. They desired to offer prayers close to the location of Moses' experience with God in the burning bush. Over time, their devotion evolved into what would eventually become St. Catherine's Monastery. A tiny monastic community had established itself beneath the mountain by the 4th century, erecting shelters and greeting visitors. They thought the bush that burnt without being eaten was located in the valley beneath Jabal Musa. It's unclear if this custom evolved with a recent wave of Christian pilgrimage or sprang from older local memories. However, the notion was well established by the time the narrative made its way to Constantinople. Emperor Justinian cemented the monastery's significance 2 centuries later, in the 6th century. He gave the order to build a walled compound around what the monks believed to be the original burning bush. With its massive granite walls, towers, storage spaces, and central church, the building was impressive for its era. In order to protect the monks and uphold the customs that had become ingrained there, it served both spiritual and defensive purposes. The monks took care of what they thought was the same bush that Moses had seen inside these walls. It is still a living plant that has been nurtured every day for about 1,500 years and is now known as the blazing bush of Sinai. It has been preserved by monks as a representation of God's presence. Pilgrims frequently kneel next to it or touch its branches while picturing Moses hearing his summons for the first time. Additionally, the monastery developed into a storehouse of Christian history. Its library is among the oldest in the world, second only to the Vatican, and contains rare translations, early Christian literature, and ancient Bibles that have only survived because the monks kept them safe. For many years, St. Catherine was frequented by academics, tourists, and religious leaders as a center of knowledge in addition to being a place of spirituality. The Well of Moses, which is thought to be where Moses initially assisted Zipporah and her sisters in drawing water, is another iconic feature of the monastery. With great reverence, pilgrims approach it, imagining the transformation of Moses from an Egyptian prince to a lowly shepherd. But why is there so little tangible proof from Moses' time if Horeb's sanctity had such deep roots? The following mystery follows from this. Why is there so little evidence of ancient people if they actually congregated around a sacred mountain? The mysteries of Exodus. The Israelites at Sinai were not a kingdom, city builders, settlers, or farmers, according to archaeologists. They were a nomadic shepherd family who lived in tents. The Bible claims that they lived on the mountain for roughly a year, which is so brief that it leaves virtually nothing in terms of archaeology. Walls, workshops, temples, and cemeteries are all left behind by a city. There are very few remnants of a nomadic camp. Such a group may leave behind 4 different types of remnants, each of which naturally vanishes over thousands of years, according to experts. Ash and hearthstones come first. Small stone circles are needed for everyday cooking fires, but animals trample the ground. Rain disperses the stones, and wind spreads the ash. These flames typically leave relatively minor soil discoloration after thousands of years. Ash in deserts vanishes throughout the seasons. It is entirely expected that there won't be any fire after 3,500 years. Post holes and light stone lines are the second. Only very thorough soil scraping can reveal the tiny round holes that tent poles leave behind. Even more difficult to recognize are stone lines that demarcated small enclosures or led animals. The original designs are later erased as nomads, traders, and shepherds tamper with or repurpose the stones. Shards of earthenware are the third. Archaeologists typically find the most convincing evidence in pottery, but nomads carried very little. Just basic bowls, little jars, and cooking pots. When these split, the fragments were dispersed over vast stretches of desert. The pieces cannot be attributed to a single group since they have been combined with ceramics from innumerable subsequent travels over millennia. Latrine pits and buried rubbish make up the fourth. In open spaces, organic matter completely decomposes. Bacteria, insects, and time would have long since destroyed any human excrement from the Israelites. Even if there had formerly been hundreds of hearths, thousands of pieces of pottery, and numerous tent markings, they would have been dispersed across a large area. Bedouin shepherds, traders, warriors, pilgrims, and other nomads visited the same region over the ages, leaving comparable signs. The scant evidence of a single one-year camp is almost impossible to identify because archaeologists now discover a combination of remnants from several ages. Therefore, the lack of evidence is precisely what experts would anticipate from a nomadic population that resided. The Israelites' lack of anything is not the issue. The reason is that their traces resemble those of numerous other groupings exactly. To put it simply, the evidence is hidden because it blends in with everything else rather than because it never existed. The Egyptians, whom many believe documented the Exodus, present a second problem. It makes sense that Egypt would record the loss of slaves, national humiliation, and military catastrophe, since they documented battles, rulers, and victories. Egyptologists clarify the errors in this assumption. Egyptian literature promoted royal propaganda rather than impartial history. Monuments showed the pharaoh's strength rather than his frailties. Failure-related incidents were purposefully left out. Egypt consistently adhered to the eraser rule. Significantly detrimental incidents were not documented in the present. One of Egypt's worst political upheavals, the Hyksos deportation, is only known from later chronicles and produced no inscriptions from the period. Akhenaten's situation is considerably more obvious. In order to totally eradicate him, succeeding kings destroyed his sculptures, obliterated his name, and rewrote history. Any event showing a foreign god overcoming the Egyptians would undoubtedly be destroyed if they erased their own kings. Egypt would have experienced plagues, failed magicians, the death of the firstborn, including the royal heir, widespread fear, slave escape, and the devastation of the chariot force and water if the Exodus had taken place as told. Such incidents would never be documented by an Egyptian scribe. Thus, it is hardly unexpected that Egyptian records are silent. It is exactly what historians anticipate. These two elements work together to produce a predictable pattern. The Egyptians eliminated anything that jeopardized royal reputation, but the Israelites left traces that were too faint to be noticed. The Exodus is not refuted by the lack of proof. It is consistent with what would occur organically. The desert is not empty, but it is silent. As the dust settles on centuries of debate, one thing becomes increasingly clear. The mystery of Mount Sinai was never meant to be simple. Whether hidden beneath the granite peaks of the Sinai Peninsula or buried under forbidden mountains in northwest Arabia, the story has endured not because of certainty, but because of its power. Technology may now be peeling back layers of stone and sand, but belief, memory, and silence still shape the narrative just as much as radar scans and archaeological surveys. What the drones reveal may not instantly settle the argument, but it forces the world to confront an uncomfortable truth that history is often preserved not in monuments, but in absence. The lack of inscriptions, ruins, or official records does not erase the Exodus. It reflects the fragile nature of nomadic life, erased by time, wind, and politics. Sacred places can exist long before they are named, and holy ground does not require walls to be real. Whether Moses stood on Jabal Musa, Jabal al-Lawz, or a mountain still unnamed, the story's endurance reminds us that some truths resist confinement to a single location. The desert keeps its secrets well, revealing them only when humanity is finally capable of listening. And perhaps that is the final lesson of Sinai itself. Not where it stands on a map, but why its silence still echoes thousands of years later.